expressed my thoughts on it. I support it fully. What is the point of having something cheap which you don't get?
Right.
So, for example, you have got very cheap water, right? Let's call it affordable.
Right.
So, which is supposed to be coming out of your taps. But it's a visitor that comes once a year.
Yes, we are here today in the Ministry of Information. We are talking to Mr. Mangwana, who is the Permanent Secretary, who has been saying very interesting things about his belief in the free market economy, of course, the role of the private sector and the investor in driving the economic program. And we hope that we will pick his brain and come out with something that we might use maybe in future to interrogate, a government policy. Thank you very much, Mr. Mangwana, for hosting us. We are very keen on picking your thoughts about your perspective on free market economies. We were following your tweets, and you said something that was very palatable from our side as commonalists, so that you believe that an economy can grow better if it is private sector driven. Now, we are converts of the free market economy, but do you really believe that our economy is a free market economy, or there's a bit of too much government interference here and there?
Thank you very much for having me. The first thing is, I believe in this from an ideological perspective, very much so. Maybe call it dogmatic. If you would read the Herald tomorrow, you will find about 2,200 words on Zimbabwe's drive to, or Zimbabwe building a private sector-led economy. That's me writing on that, because I believe in it.
Right.
Now, you asked a question on whether we believe, or I believe, that we are running a free market economy or not. I think that's sort of a closed question, but I will try to do justice to it.
True.
At the moment, our economic system is hybrid. We have aspects of free market economy. We do not have government interference, to answer that little bit of aside.
Right.
Then we also have a lot of government or state intervention. Now, let's start from the intervention point of view. Our economy is structured in the way it's structured because we had a lot of inequalities in the past.
Right.
So you needed government to intervene in order to protect the vulnerable. In fact, very few economies are purely market.
True.
So it's a spectrum. You have on one end totally free market, which is utopian, and on another end, a bit on the left side, you have then a socialist economy or communist, so to speak, which is where the central structure, central control, central this and so on. Now, I believe in a free market economy because I believe a free market economy comes with efficiencies. It comes with creativity.
True.
It comes with innovation. That's why I believe, and the president does actually, we believe that this is the best model for our country. But still, there's a role for the state. Because we know what happened in the global financial crisis of 2008, when there was no regulation, when everything was let to just run as it was supposed to be at a global level, particularly in America, with the prime mortgage rate system.
Right.
And there was a financial crisis at a global level and of global scale. So we know that the model where there is no regulation does not work. The only question is, how far does intervention or regulation come in?
Exactly.
Is it going to be stifling or is it going to be enabling? So we advocate for one where it's enabling.
Because when some economists argue that when the government introduced the new monetary policy, there was a tendency for it to be overbearing on the banking system, literally dictating to them what the market rate of the ZiG was supposed to be as opposed to US dollar. And liberal marketing economists were a bit uncomfortable. The government already having said, look, the price of the ZiG is supposed to float. What happened then?
No, there is, you see, Zimbabwe has experienced what no other country has experienced in this life.
Right.
But particularly with a dollarization and now a pathway towards de-dollarization. Zimbabwe is a country where our citizens create a business out of nothing.
Right.
And in that business we create out of nothing, we create no value at all. So, this is what they call arbitrage.
Right.
There is nothing that you have added, there's nothing that you're doing, you're just playing games. You're just playing markets. Right. And therefore, government cannot stand aside where people sell money to buy money. Do you get what I'm saying?
Of course.
That's all they're doing. Everybody out there is just selling money, playing money, creating money. You cannot have a situation like that because no economy can withstand that. So therefore, government had to innovate. The de-dollarization is a process. So there will come a time when government completely stand aside.
Right.
The willing buyer, willing seller means willing buyer, willing seller.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But the Reserve Bank still at the moment is still a regulator of the financial markets.
Right.
It's a regulator in our financial system. So it does try to be an arbiter, an honest arbiter between these parties.
Right.
Up and until we are in a situation where, number one, our mindsets as a people and attitudes has changed. Because right now, government announces a policy. Everyone out there is looking for a gap.
Right.
That's what they're looking for. They're not even trying to interpret the policy and say whether it's enabling, what does it facilitate or whatever. No. Where is the gap?
Right. Obviously, those are symptoms of probably a system that needs to be relooked at.
It's a product of history. It's a product of history. Whether what has happened because of, when our money collapsed, right. We all know that our money collapsed because we're under the squeeze of sanctions. There's no question about it. Whatever the causes were, our money is collapsed. People were traumatized.
Right. Right.
And things happened. But there were people that got rich. Some also want to get rich today if there's a new policy intervention. So because of that, we have to be awake to such shenanigans. Right. And therefore make the correct interventions while you are fine-tuning.
Timely interventions.
So some proactive and a lot of them proactive,
right.
which you would consider interfering, for which I very much differ.
Right. Now, I just want to move slightly away from the issues of monetary policy and into the economy. Look, at Commonwealth, we've been talking so much about privatization, and there's a lot that has been happening at local council level. People are talking about privatization of water and service delivery. So what is your opinion about privatization, especially when it comes to public goods?
Utilities.
Like utilities, yes.
I actually wrote again on it at length. I expressed my thoughts on it. I support it fully. What is the point of having something cheap which you don't get?
Right.
So, for example, you have got very cheap water, right? Let's call it affordable.
Right.
So, which is supposed to be coming out of your taps. But it's a visitor that comes once a year, if it comes at all. Some last saw that visitor in 2013. Right. But you're very happy because it's cheap. Right. Is there logic in that?
No, nothing.
And then a situation where you actually invest, or the private sector invests in the water infrastructure and conveyance system, right. including the purification system. And then you have it at a bit of a premium. Let's call it a premium. We're not expecting, when Harare privatizes water, we're not expecting the water to come at a premium. Naturally. We expect it not to widen the gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the haves not. We don't expect that. We expect water as a basic utility right. to be affordable.
Right. Right.
So that everyone can have it. But for us to have that, there must be investment. And who is best to invest? The private sector.
Private sector.
Exactly. I've lived over 20 years in London. The water was privatized. Whether you're using Thames Water or whatever utility facility, provider, it was privatized.
Right.
And it was always there. Things that you take for granted, you walk to a tap, you open it, you don't think too much about it.
Absolutely.
Don't think twice about it. Same with electricity. You walk to a switch, you put it, electricity comes.
Right.
You got lighting,
right.
You got power, energy. There's no much thinking. You don't say, before you go to switch on your microwave.
Or before you cook. Yeah.
Or before you cook, or before you even dress before you iron your clothes. No, you just go, pick up an iron, and that's where we want to go. But for us to get there, we need the efficiencies that comes with investment into the private sector.
And those who argue against privatization, in Zimbabwe that is, they say to us, we don't have the necessary institutions, Mr. Mangwana, that can moderate open and opaque privatizations. We end up with state jewelry being parceled out to those that have closed government contracts. I mean, and that is defeating the cause of that trajectory towards privatization.
Can they give me an example? Because I have no idea what they're talking about. I know where private sector comes in. I know that we have Econet, for example,
right.
as a service provider, internet and telephone service provider. And I know we've got Potras. And I know that the system works. I know that I get to phone call when I need. Right. I can get my internet when I need to.
Right.
And there's a regulator there. So I don't know what they're talking about. I can do very well with an example of where the state hindered the function of something that was privatized. The fact is, do we want water? We do want water. So we are not ready because we have no institution. What institution? If we are going to have Zinwa regulating, for example, I'm not saying that's the model.
Right.
If we're going to have Zinwa regulating, Zinwa regulates. Zinwa builds the dams. You build the conveyancing system, you build the infrastructure, and you make sure the water is purified, it comes to us. And Zinwa makes sure that market rates are being paid, but the utility remains affordable to the common person, to the poor among us.
Yeah, because residents' associations were always quick to point out that, look, you can't be talking about privatization of utilities in Harare because look at the Mangwana deal. What happened was that it was
what happened in Mangwana, for example? What happened? Right. What happened? As far as I'm concerned, tomorrow, tomorrow, which will probably be late by the time your viewers view this, but tomorrow it's being launched officially. The waste management side, the waste collection side, they're both being launched tomorrow officially. Things have been built now. Right. The trucks are there, and there are dozens and dozens and everything. So what has failed? Because don't you make something a bad example when actually nothing has gone wrong. So I would need to be informed more of what's wrong with that model.
Right.
If you can tell me what has gone wrong with that model, then I would say, oh yeah, sure, no, I know, that's a good example. As far as I'm concerned, Mangwana is a good example of a PPP working.
Right.
A public-private partnership working. And that's what it is. And these utility, the privatization so-called, again are triple Ps.
Right.
Government plays its role, private sector plays its role too. And then we have something that works.
Well,
for everybody.
we just hope that it's going to be so successful that when, for instance, we talk about privatization of water, it's an example that we can fall back on and say, look.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I hope so too, and believe so too. I believe it will work. Because you know what, for example, in the United Kingdom, what Margaret Thatcher did? The models that we have here, where the major utility providers was the state, was the one that was being used in the United Kingdom. And Margaret Thatcher demolished everything. And private, whether it's rail, electricity, water, you name it, gas, she did that. And for them it worked. Of course, it's a bit more expensive than what it was like. But it's there. You can't depend on a whole system where every power station has to be built by the state. And through taxpayers' money, or borrowings, or treasury bills, which is borrowing. That model does not work. Where has it ever worked? You need the private sector to go and look for investors, to go and look for capital, to come and invest, because they will get a return from the purchase of the utility or the utilization of that utility. That's the model that has worked everywhere.
Without the fear of not endangering the poor, which is what people always argue, that look, if you privatize, for instance, electricity, it's going to be at the level which the common man cannot afford.
What do you mean by common man? Because as far as I'm concerned, right now, we've got a good percentage of the people without electricity at all in rural areas. And this is the state which is rolling out through RIA, transmission networks. Right. But if we bring in a private company to do this, I'm not saying let's dismantle SISA, but if we were to do that, to bring in a private company to provide electricity, or 3 private companies competing to provide electricity, you know what? They will know that the more the customers I have, I spread the customer base, and the more money I get. Therefore, they will make sure that every homestead in the rural areas there has got power, because the more you are competing for customers. And therefore, now you compete on price, efficiency, and effectiveness.
True.
And then that brings much more maximum utility to the customer.
And development as well, of course.
Of course, naturally that's development. Right. Do you get what I'm saying? But we can't say every time you are struggling to pay your taxes, I'm struggling to pay my tax, every one of us. Of that tax that we are paying, the same pot has to go and put medication in hospitals. But it's this very same port that has to build a factory. The very same port now has to build infrastructure. No country can afford it. Not even one.
True. Even
the most successful. So therefore, you need the private investor to invest and sell the service.
Absolutely.
On behalf of government.
Beautiful. You sound more liberal than I am, actually, Mr. Mangwana. So finally, there's been a lot of discussion in Zimbabwe about the issues of title deeds. And, as Komaliso, we are one of the few proponents that have been out loud talking about the issue of title deeds. And there have been a number of schemes that we have read about. But I'm particularly interested in the titling of the commercial farming sector. How is it that it's drawing criticism from other people, that perhaps it is not the right way of doing things? It's going to hand over the property to people that don't deserve it. And it makes it even more difficult for us even to talk about a titling system in rural areas. Why is it causing so much exasperation?
As far as I'm concerned, the people that are resisting are the major beneficiaries of the land reform program. It is that little stipend they are being asked to pay that they find umbrage in. Because in the first place, when the land reform program happened, it was a lottery in some shape or form. Right. Meaning that you had a waiting list of 1 million people. Maybe 400,000 got it. Based on what? They benefited from a communal or a common asset, a national asset. But using what criteria? He was on the waiting list, I was on the waiting list, and I got it. He didn't get it. Now I'm saying, don't make me pay. Please don't make me pay. I don't want to pay. Okay, even if you are giving me title deed, but you're asking me to pay some 200,000 for that land. Why? Let me have it for free. But I want to be able to bequeath it to my kids, to the next generation. So after the 1998 lease, I wanted inserted a clause or a condition that I can hand it over to my children, or first to my spouse, to my children, and my children can call. I'm asking for title, but I do not want the obligation of having paid for it.
Absolutely.
So this is where the resistance is coming from. Because if you check, the resistance is not coming from the people that never got land. No. It's coming from those who benefited from the program.
Interesting.
They want Bakosi. That's the problem.
Which defeats the purpose of privatization, of course.
Which defeats the purpose of empowerment.
Right.
Because if you paid for it, you own it. No matter how much you paid for it, you own it. It's yours. Anyway, and as far as I'm concerned, having gone through part of the process, when these title deeds and the money you're paying is being calculated, there are a lot of factors that give value to land that they're looking at. For example, they will ask a question, is there water? What sort of water? And the surveyors will check whether they've got water bodies.
Right.
That puts the value a bit up, so you pay a bit more.
Right.
How far is it from the nearest town? Okay? So if you are in the back of beyond, of course the value is less. But if you are 40 kilometers from Harare, naturally, because
So most
you're peri-urban.
Peri-urban, right.
Yeah. They will also consider how much of that land that you have is arable. And how much is arid. Because obviously you can have 2,000 hectare farm, but you can only plow on 40 hectares. Again, that helps to calibrate the value you're going to pay. When you look at it, I think it's a very fair system, which is actually a commercial consideration system.
Right.
So people have got the right to resist anything.
True.
Even if I put out a soup kitchen there to help the hungry and the starving, somebody who's going to come up with something to resist. But I think this policy is noble. Because remember, the title deed policy is not just the one in the farming. We're also talking about title deeds in urban areas where our generations and generations have lived in Epworth and other places, Chitumbiza, no title at all.
Right.
All they sign is deed of cession when you're transferred. No, we're now saying you're empowered. You can go to the bank, get some loan, do up your place as long as you've got a business plan. That's bendable. But you've been empowered. You know, all these schemes that we went through, like agriculture command, it was because you could not walk into the bank and ask for working capital. Because you had no security. You couldn't collateralize what you had. Now you're given something you can use as collateral.
True.
If you go to the bank and get the loan and decide to buy a Hilux and you lose that land, it's on you.
It's on you, absolutely.
But you were enabled.
Right. No, thank you very much, Mr. Mangwana. Thank you very much.